Shaun Zetlin
I'm
of
always,
Zetlin Fitness.
oh, you're so good, Amy.
Oh,
I'm so happy that we're doing this again. I can't tell you enough, especially with this month. So, and
me
what just
too.
happened in the news. So it's all very important.
Thank you for mentioning that. We were talking behind the scenes, and we want everybody listening to know that our hearts are with you. This is a really difficult time, of course, in our world, in our country here in America. And we just recently had a shooting at an elementary school. And we wanted to take just a moment here to send our loving energy. And we know that nothing is enough, but it is Mental Health Awareness Month. I know that a lot of people are suffering. The things that are going on in the world can exacerbate some of those emotions that we're dealing with. Again, for anyone that's lost anyone recently in this shooting, we want to send our loving energy. We realize it's not nearly enough to heal your pain, but we hope that you hear this and somehow it brings you comfort. So just a moment here to really give our hearts to you and our energy. And thank you so much. So we are, as I said, in Mental Health Awareness Month, and I couldn't think of a better guest to have back on for the end of the month here as we sort of shift into June. I have some great shows coming up for you with some new guests, but Shaun's always going to be I think the returning guest because he's the one that helped me kick off this show. We originally met on the Global Consciousness Summit where we were able to share our stories and provide a little bit of hope and some strategies, I wouldn't even say strategies. What should I call them, Shaun? Well, you have your 5 mantras, for example, for emotional fitness, but we really wanted people to, as I always say, persevere to succeed through these difficult times. And of course, this show is all about turning our obstacles into opportunity. And
That's right.
Shaun, we've talked a couple times since this recorded show. And when it comes to emotional fitness, you're so great at delivering this message of what I call like practical exercise every day that you can do. And so before we get into this whole exercise, I just want to mention the 5 mantras that you have shared so far that I look to now. Number 1 is accept your path. Number 2, believe you are worthy. Number 3, know that you are empowered. Number 4, lower the volume. I like that one. I want to touch on this in this show. And number 5, be your biggest fan. And this comes from your book, Emotional Fitness, Empower Yourself Emotionally Through Exercise. And as we were talking last time, we thought, what can we do to help people get really involved in their mental health care? And before we go into that again, I want to thank you because this month, as we were talking, you influenced me to talk about my personal struggle with depression, which I don't think I've ever spoken about publicly. And so the next day that we spoke, I got on the video and I talked a little bit about that and sort of wanted to give people this insight into how we might see the signs, but also just not necessarily jump to conclusions about people's behavior, like if they're not calling you back or things like that. So thank you so much, because this is extremely important, especially with so much going on in the world. I believe now more than ever, we need to be in touch with people in their mental health. So Shaun, I want to open it up to you.
Okay.
What is it that you can share with us today that could help us through these tough times?
Well, it's a great question. It's certainly not an easy time. I mean, the pandemic is still going on. People are worried about climate control, obviously this horrible school shooting. And thank you for your voice and your words, because I've been struggling myself personally with how to even explain it and rationalize it within myself, because it's so gut-wrenching, of course, for these parents. But the world is very stressed, I think, right now. And we as individuals are very stressed. And so it is not an easy time, I think, to be a human being. It just really isn't. Also, keeping that in mind, I think you have a lot of people in the world who do want to be the helpers. You have a lot of people in the world who are sharing, obviously, an important message like we are today. So there are a lot of good people in the world. So the first thing I would say to somebody who might be struggling right now is to really try to attach the people who you feel are positive and healthy. That's number one. So get a good support system around you. Secondly, it's important to really address and to, you mentioned my master mantras, but it's important to address and accept what's happening right now within yourself. And so, when the news broke of the shooting, I actually was texting with my brother and I was personally working out. And I was working out, obviously, because for my emotional goals, for my physical goals, for a variety of reasons. And then when my brother and I were texting about the shooting, and I work out here at home, so it was private, I got really, really emotional. And it was a way for me to channel everything that I was feeling in the moment: sadness, rage, you know, um, anxiety for my own daughters, that they would never have to experience it. I would never have to experience it. People that I love would never have to experience it. It's so important, I think, to fill your own cup right now. And you mentioned working out for a moment, and exercise for me has always been a way of therapy. Being again touching on this month of May. More so though with emotional fitness, I think right now it's really important, whether you're in a commercial gym or you're at home, to really attach some words to what you're feeling, because I think that's really hard for a lot of people. And so I think for me, when I was working out, my brother and I were texting each other, I then did a separate text chain to myself, and I was able to jot down some words. And later on in that day, when it was private for me, in the sense of I wasn't being a father or a husband or a trainer or coach to somebody, I was able really to sit with my own emotions. How is this affecting me? Because and certainly not to get political, but gun, control and gun violence affects everybody, no matter what side you're on. So for me, it was, okay, how can I cope with this? How can I cope with this? Because I think we're already, again, as I said, as a society, dealing with so much. So you mentioned my master mantras. It's a very important topic. I want to just touch on that for a moment and say, accepting your path is always the first stage to healing. It is such a very resistant path for all of us to be on, and especially people who are suffering grief. How do you even begin? How can you even accept something so tragic that has happened to you? It's almost unspeakable. You just have to hope, that if you've lost somebody that you love so much, that they're in a better place, and that you yourself can find some sort of peace, and that there's some sort of positivity that can come out of this. And that's really hard to say right now, and for people who are truly suffering. But that's just the hope, that that's the only thing you can even rationalize, if that even is a rationalization. So going back to it, I think the best thing you could do for yourself right now is to try to attach some words to the emotions that you're feeling. Journaling might be very, very hard, I think, for a lot of people, but even just jotting down a few words, and then really giving the time that you need to move your body. And that could just mean a walk. It could mean just body weight exercises. It could be just sort of just attaching movement to the pain that you're feeling. I think that would be very helpful for a lot of people right now.
Well, moving for me is also my medicine. So, and it's part of why I'm so pleased that we're doing work together, because it really plays
Mm-hmm.
into what we're trying to help people do. And movement, of course, after something so devastating as this, can be difficult emotionally, mentally,
Yes.
physically. But taking that one step, I love how you said attach your words to what you're feeling. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because I think about, we're both parents, our kids are
Mm-hmm.
different ages, but
Mm-hmm.
what do we teach our kids? We say,
Right.
use your words. What are you feeling? Most
Right.
of the time we're taught as parents to really help our kids put words to how they're feeling. And
Yeah.
why we forget this as adults is kind of interesting, but we do. And so I think that's a really, really great point. The question that you said to ask was, how can I cope with this? Which makes me think about how, if we were to start that question, then that's that's lowering our stress. That's allowing us to think more clearly. In these
Yes.
times where you mentioned gun control, it does affect everyone, or
Mm-hmm.
just that topic. If we are already heated and thinking about what we're going to say, we won't necessarily be able to speak what we really feel. We're just going to have an emotional response. Whereas if we can pause for a minute and ask, how can I cope with this? Really getting in touch with our own emotions first. Then I think we can have better conversations. And that's what excites me, is having these better conversations instead of this anger in the world that we have.
I completely agree. And, I think a lot of people are feeling very anxious for a variety of reasons, but anxiety is a distraction. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just really what it is. It is a distraction. It doesn't get to the root. And I am always interested in the root. And so if
Mm.
we kind of get into that loop of OCD, anxiety, we're ruminating on the same thing, or you mentioned depression, that's the other side of the coin. Um, Unfortunately, we're not creating any solutions. We're just sort of locked in to this old tape of an old coping mechanism or old coping system. We need to
Yeah.
change the tape, and you cannot change the tape until you replace it with something else. And so that's why I'm such a big believer in trying to attach those words. Okay, I'm feeling anxious. What am I feeling anxious about? Feeling anxious about ABC. Okay, what is ABC? How reasonable is ABC into really forming into like a true reality? And then kind of going from there. Um, the logical part of our brains is always, of course, going to be the last to really come to the party, right? We're always going to lead with emotion, And you mentioned being a
Right.
parent, having kids, and you're right. I think going back, by the way, and not to go on a different tangent for a moment, but going back to watching Sesame Street, for instance, as an adult is fascinating. It's amazing because Sesame Street, I mean, it's incredible for a variety of reasons, of course, but all the lessons could suit adults as well. Being kinder, being stronger, being smarter, etc. Those are always the themes, right?
I
But I
agree.
think as adults, you're right. I mean, you use the word anger. I think people are angry too. Anger, anxiety are also very much attached to each other. Another side of the coin as well. And we don't hear ourselves when we lose our tempers, when we're battling somebody over social media about what we believe in, or if we lose it on our kids or even a spouse or a loved one. Um, again, the world is it's a real hot button right now, in other words. But I think it's so important to really try to, what you just said, let's get a bit clear with how we're feeling.
Yeah.
Let's get a bit clear. Let's take our emotions aside for a moment, take the anxiety aside, even the depression aside, and let's think about, okay, what is the root? What is the root? And just try to replace the tape from there. It's a much better solution.
And imagine how many people that suffer these tragedies, as we're making ourselves better, as we're showing up better, we're having better conversations, we're in a state
Hmm.
of peace rather than pissed off,
Hmm.
then how much more can we support those people? If we think of it that way, this isn't about just us being all involved in ourselves. It's about this real extension of who we are and how we're able to support people. So
Right.
I think about these people who have these tragedies. It's like, to be able to do more than just provide prayer, for example, is huge.
Correct.
We need to have the kind of energy necessary to be able to support a person emotionally, or even provide resources for them. But if we're just so busy being upset about what's happening in the world, then how are we really contributing? That's kind of my question. So I love that you're talking about all this. You mentioned, the world just being in a state of stress. And before the pandemic even arrived, the American Institute on Stress was already warning us that we're in an epidemic of stress. And
Right.
now, if you read their articles, they're saying that this is spreading worldwide faster
Yes.
than probably
Yeah.
we can keep up with. So we are in a perfect position now to take hold of this and say, okay, enough is enough, and create our own way of adapting to this world, and in a way that brings about that peace. And I was thinking about, now, do you consider yourself, Shaun, an entrepreneur, or would you say you're a creator? What do you consider yourself?
That's a great question. I think sometimes entrepreneur can have a negative connotation, like, oh, he's just interested in money, or he's just interested in fame, or interested in, spreading his brand. I think technically speaking, I am, because I run my own business and I've been doing it now for 10 years. So there is some sense of that, of course. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I mean, as maybe as trite or as basic as it sounds, my business is into helping people. And so,
Yeah.
yes, if I can get paid from that, that's just a complete bonus. But I think for people who chase money, if your goal is to chase money, I say this to the younger coaches or fitness professionals that I coach and train, you're not going to get very far. If your goal is
Hmm.
just, I just want money, I just want $1 in my pocket, people are savvy, people know that. You have to lead with integrity. And I think if you know what you're worth, I mean, if you feel like, okay, I'm going to charge X amount because I believe that's what I should make per hour, and you lead with integrity and you do the best job you can, and you're providing a service to somebody that you really believe nobody else can, the money will happen. That's what I've been trying to teach
Yeah.
these young people. And also as a reminder for myself, we all get sort of, stressed, let's say, about, what's my next move, or bigger is better. And, and it's truly not. So I think with, whether award I've ever won or anything I've ever published, it's, I'm really proud to say is that the integrity has always been there. I would never put my name behind something I didn't believe in just for a paycheck or anything else. So in that regard, entrepreneur, but yes.
Well, and I pretty much figured that. I just wanted people to kind of hear your side. I'm a long-term entrepreneur as well, and there's a purpose for my question here, because I was reading. There was an article in Spotify this week that cites a psychological study that reveals that 72% of entrepreneurs are directly or indirectly affected by mental health issues, compared to 48% of non-entrepreneurs. I work with entrepreneurs, I work with coaches. So I know, people are going to be listening. And so I wanted to mention that a little bit, because if you're new to my work, my number one topic has always been stress, mostly related around uncertainty and what we can do to kind of overcome that. Mental health, like I said earlier, has become my number one priority because I've suffered depression. So when it comes to you being an entrepreneur, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for we entrepreneurs who do tend to work alone? And I do want to mention some of these before you say your answer.
Sure.
For people who aren't aware, who may be listening, if you have an entrepreneur in your life, or you're an entrepreneur and you're not aware of this, I want to mention some of the things that we face that do create this kind of stress and anxiety that can lead to things like depression. Number one, uncertainty. We're faced with that every day. Would you agree? It's the ongoing kind. Rejection. Yep. And as I say, we felt the sting of judgment on a daily basis, if not weekly. We have had to sort of grow a tough skin in that respect. Fears. We have fears around losses, gains, mistakes, and success. And when those things are left to fester, it can increase into stress, and then of course create that debilitating sort of anxiety that can happen. Yeah. And of course, loneliness. Most entrepreneurs, we work a lot behind the scenes. By the time we come here, right, we're just like, okay, we took our shower today. Right. And we're here to be there for everybody. We put on our professional look, but there's a lot of loneliness. And so when you're going through this process of helping people, as you say, and you are in the helping profession as I am, what do you do outside of exercise to kind of bring your mental health into focus, and just, what do you do in your day that we could kind of grab onto and do ourselves?
That's a great question. And going back to what you said about, what entrepreneurs and the article said about the percentages, I completely agree with that. And the numbers might even be higher, because I really believe that every entrepreneur does feel that. Your business is ebbs and flows like everybody else. If you're working for a corporation, they're going to feed you clients, they're going to feed you X, Y, and Z. When you are running your own business, you're the captain, and so it all comes, you wear many hats, it all comes back to you. You have so much responsibility. So it makes sense that, an entrepreneur would feel, vulnerable and feel the uncertainty, etc. So I completely agree with that. I think every entrepreneur has felt that at one point in their lives. What I do besides exercise, and I'm a huge fan of this, I do two things. One, I definitely journal. And the journal doesn't have to be this big event where I got to work, and type, 50 pages, and it's got to be with perfect grammar and punctuation. No, you just want to get those subconscious thoughts out. You want to get them down. You got to take that energy, because that's what it is. And you've got to try to release it and put it somewhere. And usually when I personally do it, not to get ahead of myself, it's pretty amazing, because a lot of the times I think that I'm stressed or maybe concerned or ruminating on something that had to do with X, let's say. And guess what? It didn't have to do with that at all. It had to do with something completely different. And that's so awesome. That's pretty amazing. That, again, we're all ruled by the subconscious. So it's pretty amazing what comes out. So that's number one. Number two, what I've been trying to do more now is, especially with my move to Connecticut, is just walk, but also just really walk and be present. And, I'll walk in my backyard, I'll walk around the house even, but just, I think for people who live in the suburbs, I lived in the city for 20 years. Of course, you walk 3 to 5 miles every day. You don't need to think twice
Yeah,
about it. Here,
right.
I've been trying to walk and be very present, and I'm sort of blessed to be around nature. And so I'll walk in my backyard and just to really be present and be present with my thoughts, be present with my breath, and just try to bring it back to myself, bringing it back to
Mhm.
myself. And just to remind myself of when I'm doing that walk, it's very reflective, it's very reflective, in other words. So then I think about, oh, running a business in my 20s, running a business in my 30s, now I'm in my 40s. And I wish I kind of could have gone back to Shaun then and said, okay, man, I know you're really stressed about this. Like you really want, you want to get that new client or whatever it is, but don't worry, it's all going to work out, because it always does.
Mm,
I mean, always does. And if it doesn't, well, then you know what? There was a lesson there. If
yeah.
you didn't get the client, there was a lesson there. And so I try to remind myself some of the coping mechanisms that I had in my 20s and 30s. Well, they certainly don't suit me now in my 40s. But there were lessons there that I think as any entrepreneur, anybody who runs their own business, you can still learn, you can still grow from. And really quickly, what I was saying this to a client that I coach. She's young and she wants to go on her own, and she's working for a sort of like a bigger box, when it comes to like one of those like box gyms, like a big
Oh,
entity.
yeah.
And she wants to, go on her own. And I remember being in a sports club, I was there in Brooklyn for a while, and I just knew it was time to go. And I remember having lots of, and I want to be very honest, because this is not, when I say this, this is not a vulnerability in the sense of it's a strength, but I want to say that I had lots of anxiety and almost like kind of like a panic attack about, okay, I'm going to leave. They're feeding me clients. I'm making what I thought at the time was a competitive rate, when it comes to my salary, but I just wanted more. I wanted more. I felt like I deserved more. I wanted to be the boss. I wanted more on every level. And, I think when I actually was going through it at first, that day that I committed, there was a lot of anxiety. But then once I made that decision to say, no, this is going to be it for me, this is it, I never looked back. And I've had moments on this journey the past 10 years, because this year actually makes a decade that I've been on my own, running my own business,
Oh,
where, and I've been doing this for 19 years total, but this is 10 years on my own. So it'll be 20 years next November as being a fitness professional.
congratulations.
Thank you. But I say all that because I remind myself, like any business, doesn't matter if it's a big entity like Starbucks or a mom and pop coffee shop down the street, every business has ebbs and flows. But to remind yourself that if you trust in yourself, literally trust in yourself, you will be
Yeah.
okay. And I have never lost sight of that. And
Yeah.
thankfully, my business keeps growing and growing and growing. And, I feel very blessed, but I remind myself, I feel very blessed, but I'm also, I know my value, I know my worth, I know the content I'm putting out there. And again, trusting in yourself. And it's a very,
Yeah.
it's a very interesting reciprocal situation what happens, because the pain or the shame that I might have had as a child now only helps so many adults. And so it's
Yeah.
interesting that, again, going back and talking to your former self and saying, hang in there, because there is a bigger plan for you if you trust the past. If you accept the path, there is a bigger plan for you. And I'm living proof. Really
I
living
absolutely
proof.
love that. I love it. Just to recap really quickly, you talked about
Please.
journaling. I do that as well. When I wake up first thing in the morning, I found that's my time when no one else is awake.
Amazing.
That is my time to really dial into myself
Yes.
and to, as you say, work through some of those things you may not know. And you come up with different answers for yourself. You may have thought
Amazing.
you're struggling with one thing, but really maybe that thing didn't even matter once you read it all out. It's very interesting what happens.
Hmm.
You talked about walking. I love that you said walking, but being present, because we can
Hmm.
go on walks and not really pay attention, or just sort of, or maybe just huff our way through, the
Right.
park because we feel like we have to.
Yes.
But when we're really present, that changes the whole dynamic of how we're walking, and just feeling in our whole body.
Agreed.
What can reduce that anxiety? The word decision for me sticks out when you were talking, because that's the pivotal moment. When we decide to journal, to walk, to do these things, it becomes, we are choosing to infuse a new energy inside of
Hmm.
us. And so
Hmm.
that's how I look at it. And so this decision that we make is really how we can make these changes. And you said something else, and then I'm not sure if I wrote it down, so forgive me. Oh, I know.
Sure.
You mentioned twice about talking to your past self, which I absolutely love.
Hmm.
What we're talking about is, as we're doing these new things to support our mental health, that makes it possible to also talk to our future self. So
Right.
now I'm curious, Shaun, as to what you say to yourself when you're looking at your future self. What are some of the things you tell yourself that can help you today?
It's a great question. I mean, I think it goes back to the original conversation that we were about to have when we started this interview process, right? About, and you were like, what's the word, and the word really is, um, the word for me, really goes back to is just your toolbox, a different
Mhm.
skill set that you have. It's really easy to go back and say, why didn't I just do X when I was like, I'll just make up an age, like 20 years old. But no, because you did the best you had with the tools you were given at the time. Because it's really
Yeah.
easy to go back to your past and say, okay, I'm here presently, but if I only did this, oh man, I could have been doing this right now. But you can't ever do that because again, I believe most of us, and not all of us, do the best that we can at that time, given the skills that we've had. Now, I have different skills now at 40 than I did at 20. I have different
Mhm.
toolbox now. It's greater, it's
Right.
bigger, it's heavier. So when I say to my future self, if I do get fear or if I do get anxiety, again, this week brought a lot of anxiety, with the tragic shooting. Of course, you don't want anybody that you love to die. Um, I have to remind myself that hopefully these things are still rare, and or trust the process. Where, like you said, people will create really positive action. So there's that. But also internally how it makes me feel, because there's a lot of things in this life that happen to you that you cannot control. And it's a really that old adage, but you can control how you feel back. So when it comes to, let's say, my business, since we're talking about being an entrepreneur, I still have all these big dreams that I want to see happen for myself, because I set very high goals for myself. But the intent is still the same. The intent is still the same. I want to help a larger audience. So, what that looks like, more public speaking events. Obviously, the books and articles that I've read or that I've written rather have reached a large audience. But there's I think the need or that drive to, okay, I want to reach even more people. I really believe in my product. I really believe in what I'm doing. I want to help even more people, in the sense of I do not want those people to suffer the way I did. So there's that. I also tell my future self to remember the lessons that you learned. So I think this is really important, but not to get too personal, where this past week, or really this past month, I had a minor health scare and everything turned out to be 100% fine. But when I first got diagnosed with prostatitis, which was about a month ago, and it's a very common UTI effect for men, where we talk about urinary tract infections for women, but I had gotten it from just sitting too much, working too much, not moving. I certainly wasn't missing my workouts, but not moving in the sense of I was not walking 3 to 5 miles a day anymore. And it was very scary because this is going to sound hopefully not arrogant, but I was not used to anything physically ever being wrong with me for quite some time.
Yeah.
And that was a big shock to me. And so I had to deal with that. And there was some hysteria. And I got, a primary doctor. I had gotten my blood work done. I saw a urologist. Thankfully, everything is 100% fine. And I feel very blessed that I'm fine, in this healthy way. But it's a lesson where if something else happens down the road, if I have a minor scare or even a major scare, I will be okay. I have the proper tools to get myself through it. And I think that's really important. So I don't want these lessons to happen to anybody. And okay, maybe we're anxious or depressed or stressed. We felt some sort of, let's say, emotion that we didn't want. And that's how we dealt with it. And we got through it. And now we're on to the next thing. Well, those lessons shouldn't go in vain. Those were important lessons. That was an important lesson. I got called to the classroom for a reason. And
Oh
so
my
I got
God.
to be thankful that I had gotten a master class. I got to be thankful that I learned the lesson. I got to the head of the class and the teacher was like, you got to learn this, Shaun, when it comes to your own health. Whatever analogy we want to use. But I am
Yeah.
blessed and grateful that I had to go through it, even though, man, it felt painful at the time, because now it only makes me a better version of myself. So I'm prepared. I have another tool in my toolbox. So the toolbox
Yeah.
has gotten heavier. But those are really important things to say to your future self presently
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
you
I
can
love that.
handle what's coming your way. You can handle what's coming your way.
Yeah, I really love the image of the heavy toolbox because I'm picturing
Hmm.
myself in the future, like I'll have
Oh my
like
God.
I'm just carrying my toolbox.
Exactly. I need a
Um,
wheelbarrow now.
Yeah, exactly. That we can roll around for the rest of our lives as we get older.
Exactly. Exactly.
But it is
Exactly.
true, and it is empowering to think, that that's the whole point of looking back and forward. But again, we're not able to really look forward so brightly or so confidently if we're not checking in with our mental health, our emotional health, our physical health, all of those things. I love that you shared your health story, because I know you shared it with me behind the scenes a while ago, and so I think it's important for people to hear. And you've encouraged me to talk about some things as well.
Yes.
And I don't know if it's a good place to put it in today, but maybe I'll mention it really quickly. But I had a similar
Please.
situation where back in February, I think it was, I just had this need to, again, up level my health and just kind of take care of myself. I sensed it. I was like, okay, I need to get really dialed into my my diet again, and just get more consistent. So I bought this book that I really loved, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And it was to control my blood sugar, because I thought, I don't know why I was drawn to that book. I just was. I'm like, why do I even need to check my blood sugar? I didn't think I did, which is kind of funny. But anyway, long story short, in the book, it says, go make sure you do your blood test first, so you have some sort of baseline, and then you can check again. So I thought, oh, well, I had my blood test back, some months ago, and I never really checked it. So I went back in time, and I was like, well, let me just click into my medical file. And I was shocked, Shaun. You said, geez, I'm physically fit. I never had any issues with, it's like you said, right? So I'm looking at my blood work, and I see this note from the doctor, and she writes, pre-diabetic, or close to pre-diabetic, or something like that. The numbers were scary. And I looked, and I'm like, me? Like I got a little bit, I was like, this isn't my test. It's sort of like defensive in myself. This is not me. I eat well. And, but as I mentioned to you, I'm a bit of a carbaholic. And so I went, some years being a vegan, and I took that as my excuse to eat as much pasta and as much bread as I possibly could eat. And, when you start to teach yourself, you keep up leveling in your education about nutrition, then you learn things. And I learned that those things were turning into sugar in my system. And that really leads to things like being pre-diabetic. And a lot of people have it these days and aren't even aware. I'm really glad I shared it. You have encouraged me to share this, because I do believe that when we're not paying attention to things, our diet, our mental health, our emotional health, these are the things that can show up. So paying attention to the intuition, like I had a feeling I had to do something differently with my diet, wasn't feeling too good, didn't really know what that was, but it took some digging, it took some investigation, it took some looking into my blood work. And long story short, again, my numbers were turned completely around after I did this program I was on.
Well done.
I got my act together, and I realized, I don't have to be addicted to these carbs that I really was addicted to. I mean, I didn't know it until I had to change some things. So there's a lesson, right? For things, paying attention is really, this is mental health awareness, everyone, which is what I was saying. Being aware, though, overall, holistically, of your health, I think is such an integral, it should be integral. It should be automatic. We should just decide today. I said earlier, that word decision, make the decision today. What are you going to do? Comment, let us know, what are you doing today?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought that story up, because now that gives us both a chance to sort of give a different lens on,
and it humanizes you also, because I think, like, for my clients or anybody who sees you and me, it's important that we have our own things as well. It's not that we're above anything. Amy McCann and Shaun Zetlin are not perfect. We are not, even though we like to be. No, we just kidding. But we have things just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's true. It's
important.
True.
And it really, it's like, and then if I share what I was going through with a client, the client says, oh, I had that also, or wow, you had that. There's another connection, and it's really important. I think it's very, very important, because we're being vulnerable, but we're also teaching the world and teaching the people that are close to us that, again, vulnerability is not a weakness. No. It's not. It's a superpower. It's a superpower. And I'm sure even the most headstrong or the people who are suffering the most would love to be vulnerable, but they don't know how to, or they just can't face their own things. It takes a very strong person to be vulnerable, a very strong person. So I'm so proud of you that you did it. I know you're proud of
Thank
yourself, and
you.
you should be, because I think it's
Thank you.
only going to help so many people, because I think it's super common. And especially maybe if you are a vegan, and like you said, jokingly, but I think that might be true for a lot of people who are vegetarian. I'm going to have all the pasta and carbs that I want. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, am I pre-diabetic? How can that be? So
Right.
I just think that there's, and I also, I really want to applaud you too, Amy, about your depression, because I think that also is so brave and so powerful. And I was so impressed with you with that. I mean, heart to heart. And I said this to
Thank
you off
you.
camera, but I'm gonna say it to you again during your show. You know, was just so proud of you, because it really shows. I mean, it shows everybody how strong you are. I mean, really, you're incredibly strong, and it will only help more and more people also feel as brave. So thank you for that.
I really appreciate that because, I've listened to your work and I have had a lot of shame around my depression
Yeah.
going way, way back. And so I kept convincing myself that there's just no reason to talk about it. It's my private thing. And, sometimes you feel, I think in this space of service that we're in,
Hmm.
sometimes to me anyway, I feel like, well, I really don't want to talk about everything in my life. I
Sure.
want to serve, but I found value in what you said because it is important. It is part of who I am. And
Hmm.
there are listeners, I'm sure, in my community who are dealing with this, who may not want to talk about it. Again,
Right.
being mental health awareness, it became necessary for me to talk about at this
Yes.
point. So I can't thank you enough. It's something I've just always sort of pushed down. There are other things too in my life I just push down because I don't necessarily, I'm a very private person. So I
Hmm.
sometimes get
Hmm.
that mixed up with, what we can talk about and what we should talk about.
Sure.
So,
Yes.
and
And
thank you
it's
so
gonna.
much for acknowledging that. Cause yeah, wasn't the most comfortable thing, but I put the video out there and I love that you watched it. And,
It
um,
was so
you know,
powerful, Amy.
uh, yeah, well, thank you.
And
And I
and
hope,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I hope this encourages listeners out there, yours and mine, to whatever line of work you're in, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, that you open up, that you share these things. That is, even if you feel some shame around it, find that courage within. And if you can't yourself, or you don't even think it's worth it, find your kind of Shaun in your life, or your person in your life that can say to you, this is pretty valuable. I think people should hear it. The people that I work with, and I know Shaun too, like we surround ourselves with people because we know, again, this
Hmm.
line of work, we can be very lonely. We can be down in the trenches
Hmm.
trying to figure out our programs and how to help people.
Hmm.
But when we surround ourselves, and he actually opened the show with his number one, I believe you said it was number one. You said surround yourself with support people.
Hmm.
So it's really, that's what it's come full circle to, really, for me, in terms
Hmm.
of like what we can do, our first decision.
Right. And you
Yeah.
mentioned that you, with the master mantra, I want to circle back to lowering the
Yeah.
volume. Because
Yes. Oh,
what I
yes.
wrote in the book
Please.
is that I was very, because I think trauma. This is also another important piece, because it's obviously a very important month when it comes to mental wellness. But
Yeah.
trauma doesn't have to be the worst thing in the world that ever happened to you, like what these parents are suffering right now, which is so unspeakable. Trauma is a parent not giving you the emotional support that you needed and maybe ignoring you. It doesn't have to be, something so grandiose like sexual abuse, in other words. It can be something that was traumatic to that individual. And trauma, unfortunately, never goes away. So the reason why I want to bring up these 2 points is because, number one, it's so important that if you are suffering from something right now that was a traumatic episode, whether you were 2 or 12 or 20, whatever age, uh, you can heal from it. It doesn't mean that it's going to always go away. It doesn't mean that you're never going to forget about it. I still, have to remind myself that those demons are there from time to time. But the difference is like, jokingly aside, I have tools now, and they may want to come up, but I have proper tools. And so I think when in the book, in emotional fitness, what I've been writing about is lowering the volume, because before I did the work and before I was getting help and self-healing and helping others, that volume was a level 10, and it was very
Mm,
distracting, and it's
yeah.
extremely distracting. And now it's like at a 1 or sometimes like a 1.5, where I have such a hold on it, and I'm proud to say, and it doesn't get in my way, and it's there, but it's a reminder. It's also a reminder to practice empathy, because that's what
Mm,
the world needs right now, is empathy, and a lot of it. It's so important. So in other words, if somebody tells you, if someone is brave enough in your life to say to you, I'm going through something that is traumatic, please lead with empathy. Please don't ever tell somebody, when are you going to go over it already? Or why is this taking
yeah.
so long, etc. Trauma is a lifelong battle, and that person has every right to sit with it as long as they need to. So that's the other thing I wanted to say as well. But
Mm,
just to
yeah.
remind yourself that it's so important to, when you're with somebody and you know that they could be a safe source, to maybe trust the situation and go for it and to share. And if there is truly, let's say, just nobody in your life that you feel comfortable sharing, there are so many anonymous situations right now where you can reach out to somebody, or even me, seriously, I
Yeah.
want to really take it upon myself, even me, and just
Yeah.
emailing somebody and saying, this is what I'm going through right now. I've had
Yeah.
so many men reach out to me that I don't know after I'd written Emotional Fitness, tell me about their own episodes of trauma, what they went through as a child. And they even said to me, I really honestly didn't tell my spouse, or I didn't tell my partner because I just didn't feel comfortable, but I'm going to tell you because obviously they don't really know me on a personal level. And they know that I've also gone through it. And that to me was so encouraging, but also so rewarding, because that's the reason why I had written the book to begin with. So there we go. So that's just my hope, that, again, the idea of trauma, that you, just to tell the viewers, you can lower the volume. It may not ever go away, but you can cope. You can have a very, very happy life. And that if you are somebody who hasn't shared it with somebody, trust the situation, or trust somebody to please share it.
I love that. Lower the volume is one of my favorite mantras that I work with. So
Thank you.
with your mantras, if I'm feeling a certain way, that was the one that sticks out for me. It's just, okay, lower the volume, Amy. Gotta lower the
Yeah.
volume on this a little bit, because it's there.
Mhm.
I love that you made the distinction between, a lot of times we think of trauma as these huge events or these huge awful things, when
Right.
really, as I say, and I think I mentioned it in my book, is if, in fact, I do, I have this little space there where people can answer 5 questions. And it's questions like, is it distracting? Is it ruining my relationship? Is it distracting?
Mhm.
Is it in the sense that my
Yeah.
communication, I'm not able to communicate? If all of these things exist, or even 1 or 2 of them, it allows you to question yourself to say, is this worth examining? And we may not think of it as traumatic, but it could be a traumatic situation for you, in the sense that maybe in your marriage, for example, you've had horrible communication, and there's emotional trauma there. Do you know? It's like this
Mhm.
emotional trauma, and until you start to explore that and call it what it is for that time being, then you can start to deal with it. And
Mhm.
so, by just looking at it and asking yourself some questions, is it distracting in my life? Is it keeping me from feeling
Right.
enthusiastic
Mhm.
and joyful? I love the word enthusiastic, by the way. I don't have it
It's a
here,
great
but
word.
I love
People don't
it
use it as
because
much.
they don't. But if I remember the definition correctly, so I think it's I think the what's the I think it's pronounced, is it the Latin version? I have it here somewhere, but it's enthos.
Okay.
Is that and it
Mhm.
means from God. I think it's the
Mhm.
energy from God, something like that. I'm
Mhm.
so sorry I don't have it in front of me, because I learned this recently
That's
and I've
beautiful,
mentioned
though.
it before. But I love it because we when we think about elevating in our personal development, or in our consciousness, right?
Mhm.
The highest level is that level of enthusiasm.
Yes.
And if we can bring more of that, and so, religion aside, we're not talking God in terms of what your God, what you consider your God,
Mhm.
listeners out there. But, for me, when I think of, if we think of God as what we can bring to the table, that enthusiasm, that energy, right?
Mhm.
The more we do that, the more we elevate, and the more we're able
Right.
to communicate, and the more we're able to feel clear about what we want to say about these issues in the world.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I love
So,
that. That's beautiful. And then the one thing I would add, where it all goes back to self-love. And so I think, when
yeah.
you talk about trauma or depression or stress or anxiety, it's, well, I'm imperfect. And then so in our subconscious minds, well, if we're imperfect because we're feeling all these things, Are we still lovable? And if I'm not lovable, then F it.
Yeah.
I'm going to just burn down the house and everything with it, that mentality. And it's so important to go back to self love. In these moments when you feel stress, anxiety, depression, or trauma, please continue to be the inner parent to yourself. Heed that inner child. I mean, really, really be gentle with yourself. It all goes back to that. It all goes back to, can I give myself what I need in those moments? And okay, I'm going to admit to the world that I have depression. I'll admit to the world that I have anxiety or whatever it is that I'm admitting and sharing to the world. That doesn't make you imperfect and not lovable. No, it's the opposite. It is the opposite. And so it's so important. I really believe, again, it's, in those moments when you feel your worst, when you just feel your worst, where it's like, I don't want to start my day, or I don't want to get out of bed, or everything just feels so monumental. It's really important to remind yourself, okay, no, I love myself. No, I love myself, and I don't have to be perfect. Don't have to be perfect. I love myself. And that's, again, falls into being your biggest fan. Worship yourself the way, and it's not arrogant. I mean, please, it is not arrogant. Worship yourself the way people worship a celebrity on Instagram, right? I mean, we all want to know. It's such a great distraction in the world. What's so-and-so into, right? Or what is she doing now? Or what is he doing now? They're dating who? What?
Yeah.
No, I mean, worship yourself that way. It's so important. It's such a missing piece. It's such a
Shaun,
missing
I
piece.
love how you described self-love though, because there are people I know who have a difficult time saying, oh, I love myself, I love myself. Some people even think it's silly because they're like, I could never say that, right? But I love what you
Right.
said. You said, be the parent to the child inside.
Yes.
I really love that, especially because if you are a parent out there, or you have kids in your life, imagine how that will change your relationship with them when you
Yes.
start to realize you have a childlike energy inside of you. You have that curious nature that is primal to you, and you get to choose to tap into that
That's right.
anytime. It's in there. It will never go away. So no matter how old we get, that's why we see older people who, there are some that are really joyful, and there are some that, maybe aren't so joyful. And it could be because they're just not necessarily tapped into that childlike energy that we can all have. So I love
Mhm.
that whole thought of self-love being the parent to the child. That I love so much. I
Thank
think
you.
that's going to resonate with people, I think, who are like, I can't relate to saying I love myself. Like, that's just not,
Right.
because that happens. People will
Of
resist. And
course.
so I love that definition. I really thank you for
Just
that.
like it's not selfish to work out, just like it's not selfish to go for a walk, just like it's not selfish to journal. Again,
Right.
putting the oxygen mask on and saving yourself before somebody else, filling your cup first, all of that. None of that is selfish. No,
Yeah.
please, it is
Yeah.
not selfish. That all those things are a necessity so you can be your best self. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm thinking about myself, and I know when I need to elevate again in terms of my self-assessment and who I am and how I want to show up.
Hmm.
Because if I'm showing up in a really not good space with a family member, for instance,
Hmm.
if I feel any bit of regret for that, I know that it's because I didn't show up in a way that I know I can show up as. And, I've had some instances over the past couple of years with family members where I know I
Hmm.
could have said things better. I know I could have
Hmm.
done things better. I may have even hurt some people. I think
Hmm.
those are opportunities for us to look again and say, okay, what can I do differently next time? How can I interact with these people better? And not necessarily looking for forgiveness. I think it's like, we just need to be better. I think that really comes down to that. We need to be better people for everybody, and not to expect anybody forgive us, or that we need to forgive other. It's just be better. That's kind of the way I look
Well,
at it.
I mean, well, you said a lot, and that's all really profound. And I think the word forgiveness when it comes to family, because family can be very triggering on a variety of reasons,
Right.
And
Yep.
so I think, really the term probably is, well, I just have to know that so and so is just very limited. And you know what? The ultimate healing is to have empathy for that person. So I'll make something up. Let's say you don't like your mother-in-law, right? And let's say, oh, mother-in-law said something that was really triggering. I wanted to have it out with her. We had words. Now I feel a bit regret that I might have gotten a bit too emotional, or I was a hothead. But the point is, right, I'm sure everybody can relate to this, but but in all seriousness, it's an important, what you said, it's an important lesson to scale back and say, okay, you know what? I was triggered by this person. I did the best I could in that situation. I'm going to be gentle and kind to myself. That has to be number one. Got to be gentle and kind with yourself. And then number two, it's really important to understand that person is limited. And then three, I'm going to end this with empathy. So the next
Yeah.
time I'm with this person, I'm going to practice empathy because you know what? If they did something to you that you felt was inappropriate, even though maybe you weren't in the greatest headspace, it has to do with them. It has nothing to do with you. But of course, as human beings, we're all ego driven. So we think to ourselves, well, why don't they like me? What did I do wrong? And then we start blaming
Yes.
ourselves, or we
Well,
start
right.
thinking
We
that
think of it
we're
as
the
a
reason.
rejection.
Of course,
Right,
yes, and
right.
you used that word earlier, rejection, right? So we
Yeah.
again, that's all ego driven, and it's really easy then to pick on ourselves. And if I only did this, or if I only could have been that, they might have been, I don't know, treating me differently. But again, it has nothing to do with the people that
Yeah.
we are. It has everything to do with them. It's a reflection of their character, in other words, not ours.
Well, it's interesting. You say it's about them, but when I listen to you, it's almost like you're playing an equal field here, though, because you're
Hmm.
accepting that, okay, you can go off the rails, but they can too. So we're all actually limited in at times in
Yeah,
what we're able to say and deliver. You know what I mean? And
sure.
but I like what you're saying, because you're not putting that person down. You're not saying they did
No.
anything wrong. You're just saying in that situation, maybe we shouldn't be so self-centered to think they were just rejecting us to be mean, but maybe it was just they were limited in the communication at that moment. They weren't able to say something, or
Yeah.
we were limited in our but not to beat ourselves up if we were the ones that, as you said, be gentle with yourself first. um yeah, I like that whole, the limited view of things.
Yeah, and
Because
family's so tricky because family's so tricky because whether you've known them for decades or just a
yeah,
day, you interact with family way different than you interact with other people, and
yeah,
so there's
yeah,
that, and it's really easy to blur the lines, and to not to
yeah,
take things personally, and there's a lot of baggage when it comes to family, and who that person is now might not have been who they were, yeah, again, when they were a teenager or 20s or 30s, etc. So if you're dealing with
right,
a parent, let's say a parent at 60, 70, 80s is hopefully different than they were at 20, 30, or 40, but then you still may be
right.
carrying some pain from that. And
Yeah,
so then we have to look
exactly.
inside ourselves and say, well, did what they say, was it really bad? Or am I just
Right.
triggered because I'm still
Is it
upset
just
about something that's subconscious?
me?
Well, yeah, like it gets to
Yeah,
be very tricky and very blurry because then it's like, well, they said something that could be borderline offensive, but maybe it really wasn't that bad, but I'm picking up on it because I'm sensitive because they did something to me when I was, let's say, a child, and I'm not over what that happened. Or again, it
right.
could be an extended family member that, the two of you don't see eye to eye for a variety of reasons. But family is very tricky, very
Family
tricky.
is tricky. And that's
Hmm.
that's another reason why your whole mental health, your emotional fitness, all of that is so important, because if we want better relationships, it all starts with what we can do for ourselves. So, um,
Exactly.
Shaun, we're getting to our hour end here. I could always talk to you all day long because I love our
Likewise, likewise.
conversations.
Oh, likewise. I value them as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, and you know, we're holding each other to do an event for all of you at some point in the
Yes.
future. We are trying
Yes.
to figure out the details of that, but I
Hmm.
hope you'll all stay tuned. I know Shaun's going to be back again on the show. I love that you
Hmm.
are we're entrepreneurs, as we say. We don't get paid to do this particular show, so this really is
Hmm.
our gift and to you.
Hmm.
We hope we got a lot out of it. But yeah, look forward to these events. And in the meantime, whatever your obstacle is, there is an opportunity to be had. And if you can't see it right now, it could be that you're maybe not surrounded with people that could give you that extra leverage that you need.
Right.
Shaun was here to help me talk about my depression, and also about some recent issues with my physical health. And so I thank him for that. So find yourself a person, find yourself that community to really support you, and watch how your mental health gets better. Shaun, thank you so much. I want you to tell people again where they can find you. You mentioned they can reach out to you. So where would they do
Oh,
that?
thank you, Amy, so much for that opportunity. So my website's a great place to go. It's zetlinfitness.com. So my last name is Zetlin fitness.com. And my email is info@zetlinfitness.com. So that's probably the best way to reach me.
That's fantastic. And I will attach that to the show notes. And you can find me at magnificentchange.com. I am Amy McCann. I am your host here at Redefine Your Struggle.